Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo. I want to sit down for you guys today. Normally I would be doing an episode of the Dark Zone live, and I do plan on continuing those moving forward. I still like the idea of bumbling about in the Dark Zone, plus it'll be a great way to have discussion again, infused by you guys, and also just keep a little bit of a status update every now and then on the Division's current status. What I do feel was necessary, and I really wanted to do this. I know I talked about, okay, well, I'm stepping away from the Division, and so on and so forth, and a lot of you guys were really supportive, and I thank you for that, massively, I really do. Pun intended, I guess. It was awesome. You know, it's awesome to see how many of you guys are like, yeah, we love your commentary. I also know that a lot of you guys really enjoyed the Division, and you're like, oh, I just found your content, I'm sad to see you stepping away. But I think that's really important as to why I talk about why. Why I'm disappointed with the Division right now, why it sort of broke my heart is the best way to put it, and why I still, I hope to see it be successful. I'm not here annihilating the game, being like, oh, I hate it now, it's garbage. No, that's not the case, and I don't want anyone to think that. I still think the Division at its core is a great experience, and I think it could become a really amazing experience if the developers can really look at what is wrong with it, repair those issues, and then, really be a little bit more cautious as to how they push forward with the game. Because, we had one free update that essentially demolished the game. They've got 3 paid updates planned. If those are delivered in the same way that the Incursion update was, they're going to have a lot of problems on their hand. So let's kind of talk about this as a whole. This is something I did for Destiny when I stepped away from Destiny. And so I felt it was a good discussion, number one. It's going to let a lot of you guys know what I think needs to happen for this game to remain relevant in the community. And also, it's really kind of a calling out to you guys who are playing the game, who are disappointed to kind of step away. So let's start with that. Where did it actually start for me? The point at which the Division really did sort of break my heart. It's kind of like, you're dating that girl, you think she's amazing, and you find out that she, I don't know, she cheated on you, I guess is the most drastic way you could say it. She cheated on you, and you're just like, damn, dude, devastated. And a part of you wants to forgive that person. Part of you wants to forget about it, but you realize you can't, because it's just going to be unhealthy from that point on. And that is really the perfect metaphor for my current relationship with the Division. At its core, like I said, I love the Division. The world design is some of the best world design we've ever seen. Their recreation of New York is mind-blowing to me. As someone who really likes to soak up environments and look at all the small details, there's so much going on. It's insane, and the fact that it runs as good as it does, considering how much is going on, is really mind-blowing. It's an extremely impressive piece of art environmental design. There's no denying that. Whether you're in the Dark Zone or outside of the Dark Zone, it is all beautiful, stunning, dark. It's so many emotions all at once, and they've killed it in that respect. They really have. And that means that everything else you do inside of the Division is that much more enjoyable. Combat, again, whether you're in the Dark Zone or outside of the Dark Zone, being in these environments, to me, that's why I enjoy the cover-based combat in this game. Is it the greatest thing ever? Is there the best, feedback to the player in terms of firing weapons? No. But again, the environmental design really helps boost any weaknesses it has in that department. And fighting inside of some of these buildings, these department stores, things are on fire, it's that sense of scale, that sense of placement in the world makes combat ridiculously fun. And I especially love it in the Dark Zone, scaling up the side of a building, having a little firefight, oh, let's rappel down this side. Like, you can't take away those moments, and you can't take away the memories that have been created because of that world design for me. They will never leave my mind. And my fire team, everyone I played with, we have lots of stories to tell regarding the Division. If I could get them all together, we could have a round table probably every week for the next 6 months and talk about all the stories that we had inside of the Dark Zone. The game has brought me a lot of enjoyment. And that's exactly why I want to step away now. That's exactly why I want to stop playing it seriously and stop covering it seriously. Because I know if I continue to push forward at this point, I'm going to start to strip away that enjoyment for myself. I'm going to start to look at the game in such a hateful manner in certain aspects that it's really going to overwhelm any memories that I have for the game in a positive way. And I don't want that. Plus, I'm at that point where it's like, why am I still playing? There's nothing there for me from an in-this-moment value standpoint. And that's what I talked about, a million times in that video when I was saying I was stepping away. That's really important to me. That's why I stepped away from Destiny. And that's why I'm stepping away from the Division now. Now, do I hope that the team can bring it all back together and that the Division can become successful and have a community once again? Yeah. Is it possible? Hell yeah, it is. Look at Diablo 3. Diablo 3 is an amazing example, and it's also a game that I wish the Division developers would look towards, because it's a game that understands how you need to handle loot in an environment like this. It understands, you know, what does the player want? You know, how do we deliver the loot that they want, that they deserve, and how do we make the game still feel like there's a sense of progress in the loot? That's something that I wish they would look towards. I know they can't copy it 100%, but there's no doubt that there's lessons to be learned from how Diablo 3 grew and essentially changed itself. You know, Diablo 3 at launch was a very rough experience. There was stuff there to love, much like The Division, but it wasn't the type of game that people were going to be able to play, you know, past that 200-hour mark. That's just a completely random number, by the way, but you get what I'm saying here. Well, Blizzard looked at everything they did wrong. They listened to the community, and they looked at, okay, you know, these are clearly things that are counteractive to the Diablo 3 experience, and boom, you have Diablo 3 as it stands now. Honestly, if you're looking for a, you know, isometric dungeon crawler, loot-based dungeon crawler, Diablo 3 to me is one of the best games you can play. You know, there's some great games out there. You know, we could talk about Path of Exile, but Diablo 3 just has the full package for me. It has the amazing art, environmental design. It has the character that comes with a Blizzard game. It's all of that in one, right? So there's no doubt in my mind that the Division can jump back from this. You know, they can look at the issues, look at the problems, they can resolve them, and they can push forward as a better experience. But it's really up to the developers to do that, and up until this point, they haven't really made themselves look too good in the eye of the community. And this is where we need to talk about exploits. This is really the jumping off point where the Division did break my heart, where essentially it felt like it cheated on me. So 1.1 goes live. You know, I gave you guys my impressions. I said it was disappointing in terms of the way that they had delivered what was supposed to be this massive update to how do we acquire loot, the supply drops, and so on and so forth. I was even sort of all right with that. I was still having a good time in the Dark Zone. I was still like, yeah, I can play this. You know, this is we're still having fun as a group. Now, the incursion was supposed to be the big thing for us. Like, yep, let's get our stuff together. Let's run the incursion. So we went in 3-manned, really well equipped, and we made it about halfway through, and that was on like our second playthrough. So we stepped away, like, okay, we'll come back. Let's you know, let's reacquire. Let's maybe work on our builds a little bit. We could totally 3-man this, right? Straight up 3-man this too, by the way. Well, you know, 1 week passes, 2 weeks pass. Oh, guess what? There's an exploit. Everyone's using it. People are soloing the frickin' incursion. Now, this is a two-part thing for me on a personal level. Not only is a game that I'm enjoying playing, you know, being exploited endlessly by the community, and, you know, this is pretty much the end of that. You know, they're just running it left and right. But as someone making content, that's all the content I'm seeing. That's the content that is successful on the internet right now. Oh, this is how I cheated the incursion. This is how I exploited the incursion. I shouldn't say cheated, sorry. Let me rephrase. Exploited. Very different from cheating, and we'll talk about that in a moment. This is how I exploited the incursion. You know, that's disheartening to see. And a part of me, you know, as I mentioned in the other video, you know, was like, this game doesn't deserve to have me making content for it. Like, it's just like, why? Why bother making any real content when people are just exploiting everything? And this is where we need to talk about the exploit. You cannot blame anyone who uses an exploit for using an exploit. There's a difference between a legitimate cheat in which the player used outside resources to manipulate the game's code in some way to make themselves god mode or to cheat the game, but simply using an exploit like jumping over a wall or bouncing through some invisible wall that the developers left there themselves, that's not cheating. It doesn't matter how you define, you know, you try and wrap it in your own mind, it's not cheating. Do I use exploits? No. I don't, you know, advocate that. I'd rather see people not use that. But at the end of the day, the only person at fault for the existence of that exploit and its use by the community is the developer. So for Ubisoft to then turn around and try and actually ban and punish players for using that exploit is a massive kick in the teeth to the community. These are people that made your game what it is. And when it's obvious that there's such a large number of them using the exploit, you need to recognize you're at fault. You know, let's try and think of a really silly and whimsical reference here. You go into this restaurant every single day for the last 4 years. You love it there. You always go during lunch, though. And there's always a thing of syrup. You know, one of those nice little tin things of syrup on the table that you can pour your syrup out of. They always have syrup out. Seems like a lot of people like to eat breakfast here. You notice that a lot of people just don't use the syrup, though. And you're like, I don't know why. So one day you go there for breakfast, and you go to grab the syrup. The waitress comes over and attempts to start screaming at you and call 911. He's stealing our syrup. We're going to arrest him. You can't. That's not your syrup. That's our syrup. How dare you? That's theft. And you're like, what? I've been here, like, number one, you put it on the table. I mean, it's there. Why wouldn't I use it? And number two, I've been coming in here every day for like the last 3 years. Have you no respect for me? That's really what it's like in the Division when you try and ban people for using an exploit. You can't do that, man. That's on you as a developer. You have to fix it as quickly as you can. You have to patch it and get it the hell out. But you can't punish people for using it. Either way, it affected me, you know, as a player, and like I said, as a YouTuber, it was like, damn, you know, that's disappointing, because that's the other thing a developer has to recognize. Letting something like an exploit slip in a game like The Division, in a game like Destiny, is a far bigger deal than an exploit like that letting it slip in, say, you know, a single-player experience like Dishonored. If someone's cheating the last boss, or, sorry, again, exploiting the last boss in something like Dishonored, it really doesn't affect my experience because I'm not that involved with the community. You know, that exists, it's there, whatever. But when you have what is really genuinely a sense of community, a sense of sort of, you know, persistent and attached world among all the players playing a game like The Division, people do feel an emotional connection. And when other people are simply blowing through something that they're struggling at, it makes it have less value. It's a very psychological thing. Probably doesn't affect everyone, but it affects me. And therefore, I was affected by it, and my fire team was affected by it. And we didn't even finish the incursion at that point. We just walked away. Like, well, that's you know, that's that kind of kills it for us. It, you know, it really does. It ruins it. And I know a lot of you guys feel that way. So that for me was really where it was like, okay, you cheated on me. We're done. I'm stepping away. Now, I think, you know, yeah, the developers can recover from that. I think the biggest thing is they need to recognize how important the community is for a game that they want people to play for a year. This is something that is really a big difference. You know, you go back 5 years ago, unless you had like a strictly competitive multiplayer game, and even then you were usually pushing out a multiplayer map or something like that, but, you know, to continue to support a game for an entire year and have to provide constant feedback to the community and ensure that, you know, you have to remember too, people are playing for a much larger period of time, which means that they have more time to find said exploits. So just because you didn't find it at QA testing for 4 months before you launched the, you know, the DLC, doesn't mean that someone's not going to find it in a week, considering you've now just released it to potentially millions of players. So there's a lot of faults, I think, in their development practices they need to work on. I mean, I know it's not easy. Developing games is not easy. There's no doubt about that. And, you know, again, I'd be perfectly okay with, like, yeah, you know, stuff happens, but what really made them look bad was, you know, attempting, or at least claiming, they were going to punish people for making use of that exploit. I do think they can recover, as I said. I think, you know, they can look at all these mistakes. I think they need to recognize, much like Bungie did, how important the community is for the existence of this experience. If you actually want people to buy your DLC outside of the people who probably rather, you know, disappointedly bought into the season pass, like I told you shouldn't have, you know, you need to support a community. You need to show that you care. You need to show that you recognize the issues at hand. And they've tried to do that today, actually. They released like an update, like, hey, let's talk about issues and how we're resolving them. But it's a little bit late. Like, the damage control has come a bit too far after the actual damage has been dealt. And people recognize that. Am I happy that they released something? Yes. It's good that they did it now and, you know, and rather than never. But again, a lot of people, man, already walking away from the game. You know, you sort of missed your point. And again, this is going to be a lesson learned for them. I understand they're developing a game. They haven't really developed anything like this, but it's going to be a tough path for them. And they have to understand that. They have to win back, number one, the trust of a massive amount of the community that has walked away. And they also have to show that the Division can be an exciting experience again. It has to grab people's attention in the same way that it did when it first launched. If they can do all of that, and then push forward, you know, steadfast and strong, and release content that is exploit free, that isn't ruining the experience for, you know, the community. And if they can really start to recognize where the game's balancing issues exist and fix those problems, then yes, they could potentially save the Division going forward. But right now, I know a lot of people firsthand that I've talked to who could not care less about the next piece of DLC and what it does for the game. They're just pissed. And you know what? There's a lot of games coming out in May that, again, a lot of the people playing the Division are very much looking forward to. Overwatch, Battleborn, the list goes on and on. Yes, they don't fall in the same area, but guess what? They're cooperative experiences. They provide a multiplayer element, and a lot of people playing the Division are interested in those types of experiences, and they're going to walk away. So that's it for me, guys. Do I want to see, in closing here, The Division do a Diablo 3? Hell yes. I do not wish any sort of misery upon any developer. I want them to be successful with their game, and as I said, at the core, I still love what The Division is. I'm walking away because I want to remember it in that manner. I want to step away from the relationship before I get cheated on, and that's the case with The Division. Let me know your thoughts, guys. In closing, are you still playing? Are you stepping away? What elements of the game disappoint you most? And what do you want to see repaired and fixed moving into the future in order for The Division to remain relevant to you? I want to thank you guys all, once again, anyone who watched the channel for Division content and is still here watching this. Seriously, thank you. You know, you helped the channel grow. You made my time covering The Division really awesome. I got a lot of amazing comments and positive feedback over the, 4 months that I covered The Division, whatever it was. March, April, 2 months actually. Well, actually no, like 3-4 months actually it was with all the pre-stuff I did. Anyways, like I said, it was fantastic. Some awesome people that came to the channel because of The Division. And I'm not going to pretend that I don't appreciate that. I do, but I'm moving forward and I hope you'll join me for the ride. Anything else for me? Throw it down in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next one.